Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the races on the 14th and 15th of September, our first weekend recap, I think that's what we should call them. And there's plenty of racing to discuss. We'll cover the Kleeberg cross in Mechelen, Netherlands, starting off the Dutch season. We'll talk about the first weekend of the USCX series and the first weekend of the Hope Supercross series. And with me here to do that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Issam. Before we start with the podcast, I would like to inform our listeners that we have launched Inside Cyclocross, our Substack platform. This is going to be a subscription-based model, €5 per month or €50 per year to get inside analysis from cyclocross. It's free until the 1st of October. We're offering a 10% early bird discount on there as well for everybody who subscribes before the 1st of October. We'll be releasing weekly news reports with between 3 and 5 articles for you to read with inside analysis from cyclocross. A link is posted in the description of this podcast. Good, then the racing. The Dutch season started on the Kleeberg in Mechelen. The course was hard. It involves a fair bit of elevation. There was dry mud in the technical sections, and we should start with the women's race because there were quite a lot of good riders up there. Paulshuis duo of Bentveld and Betsema was there, Aniek van Alphen was there, and Inge van der Heijden was there as well. It was no surprise to see these riders establish themselves in the front of the race in the first lap, but you could also see that we were still in the early season. Betsema made a lot of mistakes, came back a couple of times, but got dropped in the third lap. Van der Heijden put on a high pace in that third lap, and that really was already the decisive moment because Bentveld dropped. Next, we saw Van Alphen crash. Van Alphen came back to 3 seconds, but ultimately she could never really close that gap. In the final lap, she came a bit closer, but yeah, it just wasn't to be for her. She won last year, but this year she settled for second. Van der Heijden lost a lot of time on the technical sections, but she gained all of that on the climbs on her way to take victory. Bentveld ended third. She had a mechanical issue towards the end of the race. Betsema ended fourth. She had a mechanical in the end of the third lap, or maybe it was the fourth lap, but that also cost her a fair bit of time. Issam, since you weren't there, but I was, you could you could take over the role of asking questions. What do you actually want to know about that race?
First question I really have is, what did you think of Van der Heijden and Van Alphen in a way? They seem to be the stronger women of the field. If you look at the results from last year, that's definitely not a huge surprise, but you know, it's very early in the season. But what did you think of their performances respectively? How did it shape up in your eyes?
Yeah, Van der Heijden made a strong impression physically to me. It doesn't surprise me because she's always good at the start of the season. I remember like 2018, maybe 2019 when she was still racing for CCC. In Eeklo, she was fighting for the win. Probably that was then that crazy Kaptein season, and she was up there with Anna Kay in the Xperza jersey. But let's not take too long of a sidewalk here. She's always good at the start of the season. And the days that she is bad in the mud are also behind us. We've seen that last year. She's a well-rounded cyclocross rider. She's developed nicely. So this result here, I don't really think that, like, both were rusty, Van Alphen and Van der Heijden, but ultimately I think the difference was just made in the skill set. Van Alphen is a more technical rider. Van der Heijden is a slightly stronger rider. You could see that throughout the lap. Van der Heijden gained time on the climb, Van Alphen in the technical sections, but ultimately it was mostly a status quo. I think the best example of this is actually this one part where they crossed like a tiny stream of water and there was directly a hill after. Van der Heijden ran this every lap, whereas Van Alphen jumped across. It was really a quite easy jump and then rode up the hill and gained 2 or 3 seconds through that every lap. I would say that was the main difference rather than that we can say anything about form or anything really.
It's kind of what you can expect from a first race of the season, in a way that the riders are still a little bit rusty. The mistakes creep in a little bit, and yeah, it's still very early days, so it's hard to judge it. But it's interesting as well because from what I can remember from Van Alphen is that her last season as well, she started quite well, then had some difficulty to maintain the good form that she had in the beginning of the season. It looks like she again found her mojo quite early on. So I think for me it's going to be interesting how she will be able to go through the season, if she's really able to maintain that form a little bit longer, get some better results. It looks promising at the moment, so we have to wait and see how that will play out. I mean, another question that I had was about Betsema. I mean, she finishes in 4th. What do you make of that? Is that, could we see more of Betsema at the front of the race in this season, or do you think that maybe what we have seen last season could be the max for this season as well?
Last year, Betsema, of course, had that weird season, Issam, when the team didn't really want to clarify what was happened, but we eventually found out that her bike was completely shattered when she was hit by a car when training. Unfortunately, happens way too many times. And then her season base was compromised, and it just didn't really work out. Her base was completely ruined. And the team, there was something, and then they didn't want to stay at the Koppenberg, but she's going to skip Europeans, and she skipped Nationals, and then she didn't really want to take a rest, but she still took a rest, and it just never really came together. What I saw here was quite promising. She made a decent impression. She was rusty, her chain dropped, which cost her a lot of time, but ultimately, Betsema is always a slow starter to the season. Even prime Denise Betsema needed like a number of races to get into the groove, and you could really see that here. She made a lot of mistakes, and while everyone did that, she was definitely the one making the most of them. She finished quite far behind her teammate Benveld. Benveld raced on the road for AG Insurance. She said, "My goals are later in the season. I don't really care too much about this," which is valid because we'll see her more when the courses get really muddy. It gets really tough. The temperatures get into real cyclocross territory. So it was overall a decent showing by the Paul Sousa ladies, but also it is early. I mean, I don't really add too much value to anything that happens now. There's a reason in Belgium they say the season starts with the Koppenberg Cross, and whilst that's maybe a little bit exaggerated, we'll see around then towards the Europeans we'll have a real sense of who is where, and now we all just need to pull everything apart, see everything in black and white to try and have a sense of who's where. I liked what I saw from Betsema, but obviously the competition is way more intense in the women's category than a few years before.
Yeah, interesting. And I almost forgot indeed about the messy start of Betsema in the beginning of last season, which, due to that, the crash and the injury was definitely not an ideal startup. So I guess now, hopefully, she will not have such a build-up of a season, and then hopefully she can build up a little bit stronger throughout the season and then have some good form. But one name we haven't mentioned, or I don't know if you mentioned her, is May Kabaka, and I think as a junior finishing in 5th there, there is a decent gap of 3 minutes and 39, but what is the impression she gave you? Because she is definitely for the Netherlands a good talent up there. So what do you think about her?
Kabaka is an interesting case. She is super, super gifted technically. Physically, she can still improve quite a bit. Last season, she came into the season overtrained. She had quite some time to really get into form. Things didn't really go the way she hoped things would go, but by the end of the season she was coming into good form. She finished 2nd at Cyclocross Nationals, only behind Puk Langenbach, and then at the World Championships in Tabor she finished 7th on a muddy course where she couldn't really use her skill set to the fullest of her abilities. 5th here is a decent result. But the most interesting thing was that she was riding in a completely black kit. She was on Hens Maas last year. She's clearly not on there anymore. She was racing a purple Van Rijssel bike. So that was the most interesting takeaway regarding Kabaka, that she didn't have a team. I couldn't really talk to her because the turnover between the women's race after the podium and the men's race was quite short. So yeah, I'm curious to see if she's going to be announced by a team that's on Van Rijssel bikes, or she's going to start there on January 1st or something, or if she's just without a team and she bought a Van Rijssel bike. That's a curious thing there, but yeah, she's probably going to be the best Dutch junior woman this season. There were a couple of other junior women that did a good job. Noe Moes ended in 9th. Obviously, these will be highly biased towards the Dutch juniors because they are simply the ones that are racing here. The Danish junior was 11th. Sarah Kallestrup, she's been racing a lot on the European mainland last season as well. First year junior Bente Jochems was 13th. And I also saw that she just about beat Zita Peters, who's a first year Belgian junior. The Belgians are quite high on her. I think she is like the niece of Rob Peters or something, but don't correct me on that one. They sprinted to the line. Finally, 2 more mentions before we go to the men's race. Francesca Baroni is now racing for Proximus, and Kiona Carbejo finished 6th, already won last week in the German race. I think those were kind of the main takeaways from the women's race there. The men's race was not nearly as interesting. Jordi Corses had the fastest start, but he set out way too fast. He blew up and would finish 10th. We had 3 leaders, Jens Adams, Danny van Lierop and David Haverdings. Danny van Lierop got dropped. Haverdings made a strong impression on me, but he snapped his chain, and from there on Adams went to take victory. Adams did crash twice in the final lap, which meant Wart Huijps, who had a bad start, came as close as 3 seconds, but Adams took the win. Last week he also raced in Germany, but he finished second to Loris Roulier there. So let's do the same. Issam, what do you want to know here about the men's race, where Danny van Lierop completed the podium in 3rd?
I think maybe I start with the winner, obviously, with Jens Adams. I mean, last year we saw a little bit of difficulties at the start, not really being able to get up to speed, and then later on he found his mojo and was able then to finish quite strong. Was it again the same story, or did he improve a little bit on the starts?
His start was still average, albeit be a tricky start here. You have a first curve, which is like an S curve, super tricky. If you're just on the wrong side of a wheel there, you can easily lose some places. He was lost to be in that leading group of 5 early in the race, and then he needed to chase a bit when Haverdings and Van Lierop were gone. But once he settled into a groove, you could clearly see that Jens Adams is, on his day, a top 10 rider in the world. He was in control in the lead and never really had any issues. Well, Haverdings, I think, could have put up a decent fight, but his chain snapped. So, yeah, that was that. I think ultimately it was maybe a bit of a letdown. It wasn't that interesting, but Adams quite strong. I did think his post-race interview was interesting. He said, well, I don't really care too much about these races. The season starts in Beringen. I just do this for fun, get into the groove, want to get some points, but most interesting was that he blamed the lack of concentration for 2 crashes in the final lap, which allowed Wart Huijps to come quite close. But you normally don't hear riders be that open about a lack of concentration being the cause of their crashes.
Well, good to know. I mean, it's understandable that he's saying those things, and you will hear a lot of riders say those things that he mentioned. Not really wanting to be in good form, but I do it all for the fun. I need some points. But it's good to see that the Belgian rider found at least some sort of form, and he was able to to utilize that and get the win. I mean, second place, Wart Huijps. Was that someone that you expected there in second, or did someone in the field maybe disappoint you a little at the start of the season?
No, I expected Huijps to be fighting for a podium position. He won here last year. He had a very good season last year, actually. He impressed me throughout the season, not only by winning the Koppenberg, but I remember that those U23 results throughout the season were quite good, but I also recall, like, in the Christmas period that he got top 10s in the elite races, including an almost top 10 in the World Cup of Zonhoven. That really impressed me throughout the season, so I wasn't too surprised that he was up there. I think Haverdings normally should have beaten him. Haverdings made a really good impression on me. Last year, Haverdings had issues in the preparation of his season. His endurance base got compromised because of that, and he never really recovered from that. He was in the wheel of Adams. I think he could have put up a good fight, but his chain snapped and he needed to run quite far. So that made it game over for Haverdings. Somebody that did surprise me, but positively, was Van Lierop. 3rd place, about a minute down, was not really something I can't really call it unexpected, but it was still a surprise, if that makes sense. Like, it was within the range of possibilities, but he rode a very mature race, didn't really blow himself up, looked to be super, super, like, sharp, fine form. Technically, he was on top of his game quite early on here already. It just seemed quite good. Everything seemed to be going quite well. It was looking like it was his fifth race of the season when it clearly wasn't. It was his first.
Well, you mentioned Courses already with his his start and the blow up that he had in the race, and we find Kai de Bruiker as well in fourth. I mean, what do you think of the Pauwsausen guys? Somewhat new guys as well, and some talent as well. What do you think of their performances?
Courses definitely had a classic example of overestimation. He just went out too fast and blew up, and pretty much everyone along the sidelines could see that coming. But 10th is a decent result, but honestly, he should have been a bit further forward. If you see Kai de Bruiker ends 4th, which is a really good result, Courses should have also been able to finish 5th here, but it happens. He's a young guy. He's a guy with some antics a couple of times, so it's okay. He'll learn from this. He's a second-year U23. I do want to end the men's discussion here with a mention for Wies Nuyens. He finished 13th. Why am I pointing out Wies Nuyens? 2 seasons ago, he was one of the best Belgian juniors. He finished 4th at the Cyclocross World Championships in Hoogerheide. That was also, I think, his last cyclocross race until the Kleeberg Cross. 588 days without a race because he had hurt his knee. He had chronic pain in his knee due to a crash, which put him on the bike in a non-natural position. His knee was all messed up. He was 8 months without the bike to recover, and now he's back. And to finish 13th then, I think, is worth mentioning. I'll have a more in-depth article on his recovery in Inside Cyclocross, which comes out on Wednesday, and you can also find the full race reports of the races, including the quotes from after the race, in our Substack. Again, the link is in our description. Kleeberg Cross just looked like your average race. Dutch fields, a bit of mud, some technical sections. Completely different was the racing in the US. Super dry, 4 races done. They started 1 week earlier there. They started with Englewood CX, which takes place on a farm. Wins went to Sidney McGill on both days. The men's wins went to Caleb Swartz and Scott Funston. And I spoke with the organizer, and he will tell us a bit about why he put on the event and how the event went. With me here now is Ben Agnew, the organizer of the Englewood CX weekend. It was the first 2 races of the American season last week. Ben, thank you for being here. Could you shortly introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Ben Agnew. I live in Fall River, Wisconsin. It's a small town north of the capital city of Madison. My family and I have been farming here. I'm the 4th generation of my family to be on this property. My wife Christy and I raise grass-fed beef, and we started building mountain bike trails on our farm in about 2008 and started hosting races in 2016. And it's just developed from there. And we love cyclocross and the community that is involved in it. And it was a natural fit.
Yeah, a race on a farm. It's not super typical, but on the other hand, it's also quite fitting because especially if you look at Belgian cyclocross, it's normally in a field that could belong to any farmer. I know Rutherford is a race on a farm field, but apart from that, maybe not on a farm, but it certainly looks like it. Why did you decide to organize a UCI race? Because I've seen you've put on races before, mountain bike races, non-UCI cyclocross races. Why the step this year to become a UCI race weekend?
The North American cyclocross scene is definitely, it's very East Coast centric, which is, they do a great job out there, but we felt like, it would be our contribution to help grow the sport across our nation. And I just hope to continue to see that growth. Myself and my kids all love the sport, so it's a good fit.
As you said, the races take place on your farm property. What type of course did you set out? What type of features were there?
Well, we took some of the existing mountain bike course and used that because it worked well. Some of it we ran traditional, some of it we ran in reverse. Then we had, a fair amount of some sandier sections in the pine trees that helped give it, a technical aspect there. We have it's a hill. Our farm is on one big hill, so we tried to take advantage of that. And then we had some trees that were blown over in a storm this summer that we figured we would just cut them up and utilize them to make log run-ups. And that worked out really well. So yeah, we tried to create a good mixture of fun technical, some power, some climbing, and make sure that the racing was, entertaining for both racers and spectators.
The race is very early in the season. Maybe not all the top riders were there, but still there were plenty of riders that did show up. Sydney McGill won the women's race on both days. Scott Funson, Caleb Swart took the win in the men's races. How satisfied were you with the first UCI run of this event?
It was great. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the most heavily attended, but we knew being a first year and very early in the season that was likely. We also Gravel Nationals was going on, Road Worlds is going on, so a lot of the top pros were going to be going to that anyways. But we have a really good relationship with Trek Bicycle. They are our title sponsor for both our UCI mountain bike and for our cyclocross weekend, and we have a lot of friends there. They're just 20 miles south of us. And that has been, that they helped us a lot with infrastructure for the race. And the idea is that we would hopefully get to work with them and get a weekend before their race next year.
Yeah, that could definitely help in the sense of getting more riders there. Next year, you'll also, by UCI regulations, be allowed to put on a C1 race, but also, I don't think it's really a shame that not everyone was there, because it gives you the opportunity to have a couple of other riders fight for the podium spots. Maybe in a couple of years, you'll be looking back at the first edition, see Miles Maddern and Luke Walter, both first-year U23s, on the podium, and by then they might be some big names in the American scene. Or Lily Sonneman, just a second-year junior, ending on the podium on the second day of the women's race. Nico Knoll, who won both junior women's races here, is also very talented. She's been in the top 10 of European World Cups as a first-year junior last year. So I also think that's part of the charm when not everyone is there, and then maybe in a few years people will look back on this podium and be like, oh, Miles Mattern, his first podium, now he's fighting for the win in all these big races.
Yeah, absolutely. Lily Sonneman especially, the Sonnemans are good family friends. Both Lily and her brother Finn have helped us build this course. Our kids ride with them. They were here last night riding the course. So, it's a really nice thing to see for, local up and comers. And she's been very fun to watch, her develop as a racer. Yeah, I 100% agree. It's good to provide opportunities for the up and coming racers. And that's, what our goal would be to even, the junior fields. That was a really exciting racing to watch. As long as we can keep doing this, I think that is going to be necessary to grow the sport.
Yeah, and that adds to the point that you made earlier about moving a couple of races away from the East Coast, where most of the races are centered right now. Like in the juniors race, the winner was Ethan Brown. He races for Midwest Devo from Indiana, and for him this is a lot closer than needing to go to the East Coast every week. And I saw Nathaniel Halverson and James Halverson in the results. They are from Minnesota, so for them to have a race within driving distance or within a day's driving distance is a real help. So I think in that regard it's good. And I fully agree with the points that you made earlier, that whilst it's not a dip or a slide towards the East Coast events, it's also important that there are events elsewhere in the countries for the many athletes that are not from there. For instance, I saw Luke Osmet was there. He is from Colorado, and okay, of course, when you come to the elites, there's a couple of riders like Jules van Kempen, who comes in from North Carolina, but it's good that for those Midwest kids there's another race weekend other than the Waterloo weekend, because especially for the juniors and everything below, and I saw there were master events, like it's important for them to also have a racing scene which is within driving distance.
Yeah, absolutely. The amateur fields are very crucial. One for they're the built-in spectator base for the rest for the elite fields, and two, the junior fields. We need to have good, accessible racing for the junior fields if we're going to develop future strong pros in North America. And that's what you see in Europe is just the racing is so much more accessible than it is in the U.S. because it's there's healthy racing in every country, whereas the U.S., like this year, we've gone to mountain bike nationals all the way. We've driven to California, we've driven to Pennsylvania, Montana, Arkansas, and it's a big sacrifice for many families. So, for us to be able to continue to make that accessible for amateur fields, it's very important for the sport.
Yeah, you mentioned that your own children also race. I saw Thomas Agnew, your son, finished fourth this weekend. How do you combine it in the weekend, being race promoter and also coach and parent?
Oh, that I would say is a testament to the quality of the people I've surrounded myself with. We have like Kevin Sonneman helped out, Lily's dad. He's a great friend, and he actually was helping pit for my son. We had the Brazen Dropouts local cycling team assisting with all the race duties during the weekend. So my job as race director, as long as everybody has a clear role for the race, it's not really that difficult. I mean, it's a lot of work before and after. The event itself went relatively smooth.
Then I also came across something interesting on your website. Littering is never allowed in cyclocross, but here at the farm it said it was extra important because of the cattle potentially eating the gels and blocking their digestion. There would be a 5-minute penalty unless you do 30 minutes of course cleanup. How did that penalty come together?
Unfortunately, it was a rule that we found necessary after it became a problem, and that was really an unfortunate thing. We had a calf eat a bunch of gel packs after a UCI race that we ended up that calf did not make it, and that is just I feel like, and not just at our race, but if we're going to call racing sustainable, racers need to be responsible for their litter regardless of how hard they're working. It's not okay. Whether it's my farm or it's a national forest somewhere, we can't just litter because we feel like we're there working hard. It's not any racer's right to litter. So it's my way of educating racers, and it isn't something that we've enforced numerous times during our events, and it's well received. Everybody understands, and my hope is that anybody who has the penalty handed down to them never does it again at my house or any other race that they go to.
And I think the penalty itself is the perfect form of doing it, because it shows your intent is clearly not to punish riders for the sake of punishing them, because they can get away from their penalty if they clean up the mess they've made. So in that regard, I think it perfectly serves its purpose and is different than what we see in Vuelta, where it seems that every day the UCI is just handing out some fines for random instances, just other than littering, just because it's almost the end of the year and it seems like they have some gap on their budget which still needs to be filled, where, oh, you get a penalty for this and you get a penalty for this. This is really a penalty which seems to serve its purpose. And yeah, I mean, when you read it the first time, it's quite funny because it makes me think of like high school detention. Oh, all of a sudden you need to clean up the backyard of the high school because, I don't know, whatever you've done. I've never been in the position, but I've seen my friends being sentenced to do 1 hour of cleaning. But yeah, it serves its purpose very well. So I still wanted to ask about that. And yeah, it seemed like a fun event. I think we're coming to the end. My final question would be the same one that we're asking to every guest this season. We started it with Imogen Wolf last year. What song do you purely associate with cyclocross?
Hard question, depending on where I'm at in the race. I would say anything by like Metallica. I'll say Seek and Destroy by Metallica.
Seek and Destroy by Metallica. It will be added to our playlist, which our listeners can find in the description of this podcast. And it will be the second song. Hopefully, I'll do my best to keep bringing guests in this year, because we'll have more and more songs added to the playlist, which can be pretty much for anyone, any moment. I'm waiting for somebody, and it will come at some point, to add the Opus song there, because I'm kind of surprised it's not been said so far. I expected it to be, normally it's a number one by somebody, but it doesn't matter. I'll add it right to the playlist, the song from Metallica. Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
We will now resume our conversation, the weekend recap. Let's head to the other races in the US. Some riders warmed up in Englewood, others showed up for the first time for the start of the USCX series at GoCross. Unfortunately, no coverage. I always enjoyed watching them, and I also enjoyed doing the podcast on them last year. But without broadcast, it still started. Let's start with the men's race. Andrew Strohmeyer took the wins on both days, quite dominant fashion. I'm not really surprised, especially because the course was fast. He's a really good rider on those courses. He might be the best rider of the US this season already. Eric Brunner is not apparently doing that many races. He's not entered for any of the USCX series races. I mean, maybe he'll be better than Strohmeyer, but ultimately this year or next year, you would fully expect Strohmeyer to be the best rider of the US, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that already last year Strohmeyer showed some great promise, I think, for that position, and this year taking the win in on both days, I think that is definitely a he set his mark, and he's definitely the guy to beat at the moment in the States, and that's that's a positive sign for his side, and he now needs to that position comes with some responsibility, and he has to try and show himself greatly in the USCX series and also later on in Europe, and that will be interesting how he will cope in the European races.
Second place on both days went to Kerry Werner, which was an interesting observation, let's put it that way. He made a return to a full-time cyclocross season, racing for Groove Off-Road now, team of Caroline Mani. It was interesting to see him take second places on both days. I will say that I expected Scott Funston to get the upper hand over him, but that didn't happen. Scott Funston ended third and fourth on day 1 and 2 respectively. That was for me a bit of a surprise. Again, no coverage, so let's not do full in-depth analysis. Owen Brenneman also surprised me with 2 fifths over the weekend. That is definitely an improvement from what we've seen from him before. And then finally Curtis White, he had a 4th place and a 6th place. He had his season preparation be compromised by serious health issues, is what he wrote. I think he wrote something about stomach issues, but yeah, I do wonder, Issam, did he get them after seeing what kit he would be racing in?
You're not a fan of that kid, are you?
No, I'm not a fan, but here I'm just joking. Obviously, I wish Curtis the best, and it's sad to see his preparation be affected by this. I'm trying to track down what he posted exactly, but yeah, please continue.
Yeah, no, but it's obviously it's not a great way to start your season. Especially, I think also mentally it's not great that you kind of know that you have been compromised by your health, and it's not how it's supposed to be going, and the only thing that you kind of can do is work around it and give it your all, and you basically have to hope that you get that 1 or 2 weeks off where you can train a little bit and see where you can get some form of performance in a way back that you lost due to the health issues. And for him, it's he's a somewhat experienced rider, so he knows how he has to build up his season. So hopefully he can use that to his advantage and stay calm. I think that's the most important thing. We are very early in the season. It's obviously not great for his for what he could achieve in the USCX series, but he shouldn't really look too much into that. Try to make the best out of it. That's probably if I could give any advice, if that would matter. I mean, that's probably what I would be looking for. Try to make the best out of it.
He didn't actually write about stomach issues. I screenshotted his Instagram story. Here's what he said. Initial thoughts on Go Cross Day 1. Normally 4th would be a ride that would be disappointing. I put all of myself into training and racing, and I expect a lot of myself in results. Coming into the season, I dealt with some major setbacks with my health. I didn't know where the chips would fall in the opening race. The last month was all about staying patient and positive. I'll share more details soon, but all I'll say now is that I love the feeling of being back between the tape and feel fortunate that this sport is my life. 4th is a good starting point onto day 2, and on day 2 he managed a 6th. So I misremembered the part about stomach issues, but health issues still. It's always bad to hear riders have that. I mean, Thibaut Nys has been sick recently as well. Pim Ronnaar posted on Instagram that he was infected with a Lyme disease. So definitely always tough, and especially because you need to have your base built before the season. I just hope that it turns out well for him throughout the season, because judging from past experiences with riders who've had a collarbone injury or any other health injury before the season starts, it's always hard for them to keep things on the up throughout the season. Like, their endurance base is fragile, and that's super costly in a cyclocross season. But as you said, he's experienced, so let's hope that things work out for the better for him. Then the women's race, because I still need to mention that Marcus Shelton ended 3rd on the second day, which was a good result for the U23 from Bear CX. But then I think the woman, where we had the same top 6 2 days in a row. Clausel won ahead of McGill. Caroline Mani was 3rd. 4th was Manon Bakker. 5th was Katie Klaus. And 6th was Raylin Nuss. Issam, what would you want to discuss here?
Well, consistency is key, so they didn't make it that difficult for us to go over the top 6. I mean, it's nice to see Bakker going to the overseas, going to the States, and have some racing up there. I think that is definitely nice to see. Clausel seems to be having some good form early on, which is in a way not really surprising. McGill is kind of building on her performances from last season. I think that is encouraging to see. Caroline Mani surprised me in a way, to be honest. I didn't expect her in the top 3, and
this is what she does. This is what she does.
It's incredible for her at her age, and I don't want to be age shaming or anything, but it's still, at a certain point age is gonna count. But for her, it seems that she's still able to count in those top 3s, and I think that's really impressive. If you go down, it's for Bakker, it's a bit difficult to judge where she is at the moment.
Bakker, let me just break in there. I got told that the combination of travel and heat in the first race of the season wasn't too great for her. I know Bakker is also a rider that normally struggles a little bit at the beginning of the season. Last year, she was only 6th in Lützelbach in Germany, and she was beaten by Judith Kral and riders who she would comfortably beat later in the season. She was 6th in the Kleeberg, where I was last year as well. She got beaten by Baroni there. So let's definitely for Bakker not jump to any conclusions, because she's a slow starter to the season. She had the jet lag. She doesn't like warm races. So definitely for her, let's not jump to the
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't also planning on doing that because, as you said, not really someone that is at optima forma from the start, and every rider has their own way of an own preference as well of starting the season, and some like to be already kind of close to the maximum, and some kind of leave it for later in the season. Everyone has their own goals, and I definitely think that for that you have to wait also a little bit, and we will see what the next couple of races will bring, and especially in Europe how she will perform. But I think then if we go to the 5th and 6th place with Katie Klaus and Raylan Nuss, it's despite the fact that it's an American series, they were not really able to play a role in for the podium, which in a way is it's not a great situation to be in. But I think it's the facts at the moment, and we have to see if they can grow within this series in the next couple of races. That will be interesting, but it's they were up there. The results are there, but it's it maybe could have been a little bit better. What do you think?
First of all, I think you made some good points about Clausel. She's always good in the early season. She loves fast courses, so no real surprise there. McGill also good. I kind of expected her to make a similar step like this last year. Mani already said super impressive at this age, but also maybe a little bit worrying that riders like Raylan Nuss and just all the Americans still can't really catch up to Mani, who's turning 37 in January. And I think you make a very good point there. I grew up watching cyclocross in an era where Katie Compton was flying the flag for the Americans, but behind Katie Compton there were multiple riders that if you would take Katie Compton from the results, there would still always be 2 or 3 Americans that had a chance of a top 10 in a big race. I remember a World Cup in Namur with Compton, Faringer and Honsinger in the top 10. I remember being at the Cyclocross Worlds in Valkenburg with 3 women placing in the top 8. And yes, that's an atypical course, but still the point stands. If you would take Compton away from the equation there would still be a broad level of American women elite riders. And that was for the best part of 20 years the case. And now, this season, without Honsinger, you're in a situation where the rest isn't there. Yes, it's promising to see riders like Kaya Musgrave and Lauren Zerner, for instance, catch up to Raylan Nuss slowly but surely. But I say this with all the respect, because I respect every team and every rider putting the effort in. I can't underline that enough. But Raylan Nuss also is not exactly a world-class rider. She's a very good American rider, 2-time Pan American champion, something I will never achieve in my life. But Raylan Nuss last year at Cyclocross Worlds was 26th, and the year before she was 21st. And whilst those are more than respectable results, it's also not like this means they are gaining on a top 10 position, which is where we started this discussion with. A situation where it just looks different than what it's been in a very long time, where there was at least somebody who was a world-class top 10 level rider, and now we're in a situation where the best American rider is not even, or potentially the best American rider, is not even racing the USCX series, because she's a first-year U23 who's still a junior woman and racing Road Worlds despite not doing that many races on the road this season.
Yeah, it's... I totally understand. It's not, as you said, it's with the utmost respect, but it's the situation that they are in and that cyclocross is in at the moment. It's difficult because as you said, normally there would always be someone that you could kind of put up there, and that was then the one that you could focus on a little bit. But as of now, it's not really there, and as you're saying, it's a tricky situation to be in as a nation, because I feel that if the results are not really there, sometimes it's harder to find the financial support, to find the foundation to get it going, and to have support for the ladies overall. So I don't know. It's a difficult situation. I don't think we should exaggerate it to the max. I don't think it's it's not a Houston we have a problem situation, but I definitely think that it's something that should be should be looked at, and especially there should be more done. There should be a better structure, and in what way and how, I haven't thought that through. I don't know if you did some thinking on that, but something has to be done, because you cannot continue like this. Otherwise, the women's category becomes somewhat non-existent. And to be fair, I mean, we're now really going and hammering on the women's category. The men's category is not that great either. Huh? There's also it's a difficult situation where the Americans are in at the moment. I feel where you kind of feel that there is a that they are missing the connection with the top of the Europeans, and that is a difficult situation to be in, because, as I said, the commitment has to be there. And yeah, we will see how it will play out, and hopefully it will play out a little bit more positive than I'm thinking about it right now.
Obviously, money plays a big role. Non-Olympic sport federations don't have money. Gravel has taken a lot of money, especially from the US scene. And then, additionally to money, there's just the geographical barrier. The US needs more money to put together the trips to Europe because it's more expensive for them. But the geographical barrier is also present in the sense that there's less next opportunities for young riders. Let's illustrate it according to an example. Let's look at the results from the Cyclocross World Championships that were held in Fayetteville, where not even everyone was there. But if you look, Backstedt, she's made next steps in her career after winning that title. She's been on the road with first EF and now with Canyon. Leonie Bentveld has made steps on the road, raced for AG Insurance. Laura Molengraaf has signed with FDG. Ella McLean-Howell is a bit of an exception. She's focused on the mountain bike. Federica Venturelli has made steps with UAE. Eva and Isabella Holmgren, they're picked up by Lidl Trek. Julia Kopecky is on AG Insurance. If you don't have such a next step and there is no money, I don't at all blame you if you at some point decide to use your school degree that you've obtained, or you decide to get another one. Because if you make 10 times the money you make doing cyclocross as being a lawyer or being a doctor or being an engineer, then I can't blame you. I mean, it's showing, like, if you look at the age gap, you see there's not really that many riders high in their 20s in the US field. That's also telling, because it's not really feasible for them to be a cyclocross rider. It's just a very tough position to be in. Again, I'm not blaming a rider or a team, just not even a US issue. It's just that it's relevant, especially here on the women's side, because it's different than what it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one point that you brought up about kind of the next step, when you are at a certain team and you have to make that step towards getting better support in a way. We discussed in the last podcast, we discussed the transfer of Gladonova to Visma, and I think that one was definitely an interesting transfer that was made. And I think that is, the way those guys will be treating her and will have, that support that she will get from that team will be way different, and it's not even comparable to the support that you could maybe get at the best cyclocross team in the United States. And that's not too bash, but that's reality. We cannot say that is not the case. I think that would be, we would be lying to ourselves. So I think that the fact that those women at such an age already can make a step like that, and for the Americans making such a step is maybe a little bit more difficult. It's almost like they already have a sort of an unfair advantage. And then when you reach your 20s, when you reach 21, 22, they already make quite a step forward. And especially in the women's category, it's a category where the level, it seems like, is only getting better and better compared to the men's category, which, of course, they're also getting better, but it's a bit of a different situation over there. So it's a hard situation where they are in, and at the end of it, it's difficult to change it within a year. There needs to be a thoughtful idea that has to come up in terms of structure, in terms of support, and who knows, then you can maybe change it a little bit and turn it around. But if you keep on going with the same structures and the same ideas, I don't think you're going to get that far, and you end up in a similar situation like this for probably years to come. And I think that is not really an hopeful situation to be in.
Well, I can't really right now lay out like a structural vision to get everything done, but I think at the end, again, the most important thing here is money. Like, if you have money at your disposal, you can do a lot more exciting things and put together more exciting programs, etc., etc. It's the same with the entire USCX series. I admire their optimism and hope to try and get more European riders there, but it's just hard. European riders don't really want to pay that money to go there. They also don't want to start their season in September doing hot races, and the money that you can earn there doesn't really weigh up for them to all of that. Whereas if they can just miraculously find a sponsor that puts down super prestige like prize money for the overall, I can bet you many riders will be interested in coming to that lucrative series. I mean, way back to the Tour de Trump, the entire reason that tour on the road was a success was because they just put down more prize money than the Giro. It was, after the Tour, the most lucrative stage race to do, which is why many European teams thought we should do that. Ultimately, the thing failed in the end because you're never going to outdo the ASO. But if you have money, life is easy, life is fun. But if you don't have money, and that's kind of the situation we're in with cyclocross, you're scrambling and scraping, and you see that the USCX series, many riders that they might have hoped to attract went to the UK because there's a series there, Hope Supercross, and they've alternated their format, 4 races in 8 days with points, and you see that's cheaper, so they do that. And what do we see? Thomas Meen takes the win ahead of Jorben Laurijsen and Ben Askey on the first day. On the second day, Meen again won ahead of Laurijsen, but this time Toby Barnes was third. The women's podium was Laura Verdonschot ahead of Nette Koppens and Femke Gort on day 1. On the second day, Laura Verdonschot again won, this time ahead of Jinse Peters, with Femke Gort taking third place. I think, Issam, we should leave it at that. I think we can keep having long discussions about the foundation of cyclocross programs. And please don't think this is only a thing that relates to the US, because the Italians we can have the exact same discussion about. We could have the exact same discussion about the Czech riders and the Czech programs as well. But it's just now because the USCX series is here and we have time on our hands to do a bit more in-depth podcast this early in the season that we can permit ourselves to do this. But yeah, I think we should leave it at that. Issam, thank you for your insights.
Absolutely, thank you for having me. And yeah, as you said, it's not an American problem. It's a problem that you see in several countries. But as you said, right now we have the time to talk a little bit more about it, and so we did. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, again, thank you for being here. We'll leave it at that. We'll be back next week and we'll discuss some more racing. We'll probably zoom in a bit more on those Hope Supercross series, as there's no high-profile Dutch race, and we'll cover the second weekend of the USCX series, which takes place in Rochester. Thanks everyone for listening, and goodbye.